He wasn't supposed to be there that morning. The hallway of Millstone High was silent, a long, sterile corridor lined with faded banners from a decade of forgotten football seasons. The air smelled like floor wax and rain. 17-year-old Ethan Walsh stood alone outside room 204, his hand hidden inside his jacket. The first bell hadn't rung yet. Nobody should have been there. When the classroom door opened, Mr. Daniel Harper, the school's English teacher, stepped out. His tie was loose, his smile tired. "Ethan. You're early." Those would be his final words. But before that moment, before everything shattered, there was a story. One the town of Millstone would argue about for years. Before we dive deeper, hit subscribe. Because this isn't just a story about a crime, it's a story about trust, betrayal, and how love can turn into something unrecognizable. Millstone, Ohio, population 3,200. A place where the diner served the same coffee for 30 years, and the sheriff's office doubled as lost and found. Ethan lived in a small blue house on Birch Lane with his mother, Laura Walsh. She worked nights as a nurse's aide and slept through most mornings. People liked her, kind, modest, the type to send casseroles when a neighbor got sick. Ethan was quiet but brilliant. His notebooks overflowed with sketches and poems he never showed anyone. When Mr. Harper arrived that fall, things began to change. Fresh from the city, early 30s, charming in the effortless way small towns don't forget. He loved books, quoting Hemingway and Dickinson with the confidence of someone who'd lived more than he'd read. He noticed Ethan's talent immediately. "You think like a writer," he told him once after class. For Ethan, that single sentence meant more than any award. Harper started a small writing club that met every Thursday. Just 5 students, but to Ethan, it felt like belonging. Harper lent him novels. Catcher in the Rye. Of Mice and Men. Crime and Punishment. Each one came with a small note in the margin, "Pay attention to motive." Ethan did. On evenings when his mom worked late, Harper offered him rides home. They'd talk about books, the future, how talent could be a ticket out of small-town obscurity. One evening, Harper dropped Ethan off and met Laura for the first time. She invited him in for coffee, polite, neighborly. They talked for almost an hour. Ethan watched from the hallway, notebook in hand, unable to shake the strange feeling of seeing 2 worlds he'd kept separate start to blur. Weeks passed. Harper became a regular visitor. Sometimes to discuss literature, sometimes just to check on Ethan's progress. And then, one Friday night, Ethan came home early. Through the kitchen window, he saw them. His teacher. His mother. Laughing. Close. Harper's hand brushed Laura's. She didn't pull away. Ethan froze, his stomach hollowing out. He didn't knock. Didn't speak. Upstairs, in his journal, he wrote. "I thought he saw me. Turns out, he just wanted her." In a small town, secrets spread like smoke under a door, invisible at first, then impossible to contain. Within weeks, everyone seemed to know. "Guess your mom's doing extra credit with Harper," someone sneered at lunch. Ethan didn't answer. He just left. The laughter followed him all the way down the hall. Laura, oblivious, started dressing differently, brighter colors, perfume Ethan hadn't smelled in years. She was happy again. Maybe for the first time since his father left. But happiness, for Ethan, began to taste like betrayal. He confronted her one night. "Is it true?" he asked. She hesitated too long. That silence was all the answer he needed. "He cares about me," she said finally. "He listens." Ethan laughed, sharp, bitter. "He's my teacher." "He's more than that," she whispered. Ethan walked out. The front door slammed so hard the picture frames shook. In his room, he tore a page from his notebook and wrote 3 words, "Make it stop." The following weeks blurred together. Ethan stopped turning in assignments. Harper pulled him aside after class. "You're angry with me," he said. "You think?" Ethan muttered. "Your mother's an incredible woman," Harper began, but Ethan didn't let him finish. "She's my family. Not your project." That was the last conversation they had. After that, Ethan stopped going to writing club. He spent his evenings alone, reading old letters from his father and writing in his journal until his hands cramped. One entry stood out. "When you take everything from someone, don't act surprised when they've got nothing left to lose." It was pure accident, or fate. Ethan found the letter inside his mother's purse one morning while searching for bus fare. "You deserve more than this town," Harper had written. "You deserve someone who sees you." It wasn't just affection, it was a promise. Ethan folded the letter slowly, slipped it into his pocket, and walked out. He skipped school that day, wandering the fields behind their house until dusk. When he came home, Laura was gone. On the counter sat a half-finished cup of coffee, still warm, and another note in Harper's handwriting. Just one line. "Tomorrow, before class." The next morning, Ethan arrived at school early. The rain from the night before had turned the school parking lot into a mirror of puddles. Ethan parked his old Ford pickup in the far corner. Sat there for 10 minutes without moving. His mother thought he was asleep in his room. She had left for her early hospital shift an hour earlier. In his lap was his father's pistol, a .38 revolver he'd found years ago, hidden under floorboards in the shed. He hadn't touched it until now. He didn't load it right away. He just held it. Cold. Heavy. Real. "You deserve someone who sees you." The words from Harper's letter replayed like a loop. At 7:30, Ethan stepped out of the truck, tucked the weapon under his jacket, and walked through the side entrance of the school. He moved like a ghost. The janitor saw him in the hallway, quiet as ever, and nodded. "Morning, Ethan." Ethan didn't respond. Outside room 204, he waited. The clock ticked toward 7:45. Harper arrived, umbrella dripping, briefcase in hand. He smiled faintly when he saw Ethan. "You're early," he said. Ethan's voice was soft. "We need to talk." Harper nodded, opening the door. "Of course. Come in." The two stepped inside. The door closed. No one heard what they said in those final moments. Only that the conversation was calm, until it wasn't. At 7:51 a.m., a single gunshot echoed down the second-floor hallway. Teachers froze. Students screamed. For a moment, no one moved, as if time had stopped. Then came the chaos. The first on the scene was the janitor. He opened the door and immediately stumbled back. Mr. Harper lay on the floor beside the desk, his shirt blooming red at the chest. His eyes still open, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, the gun resting loosely in his hand. His eyes were distant, hollow. He wasn't crying. He wasn't moving. When the janitor shouted for help, Ethan looked up and said just one thing. "He took everything from me." The police arrived within minutes. There was no struggle. No attempt to run. Ethan placed the revolver on the floor and whispered, "It's over." They led him out of the school in handcuffs, head bowed, rain still falling. Students watched from classroom windows, some crying, others too stunned to speak. The local paper printed the story before noon. Millstone High student kills beloved teacher. By evening, the story had gone national. In a town where nothing ever happened, this became the story. Laura Walsh found out while on her hospital shift. A coworker handed her a folded newspaper and said softly, "I'm so sorry." She didn't believe it, not at first. She thought it was a cruel rumor. When she arrived at the station and saw Ethan sitting behind the glass, hands cuffed, eyes empty, the truth hit her harder than the rain outside. She reached for him through the glass, trembling. "Why?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked away. That night, the sheriff made a statement. "We have no evidence of self-defense. The victim, Daniel Harper, was unarmed. The suspect, Ethan Walsh, is in custody and cooperating." But behind closed doors, the officers argued. Half of them saw Ethan as a killer. The other half, a broken kid caught in something he couldn't handle. The investigation stretched for months. They found the gun's serial number, registered to Ethan's father. No fingerprints except Ethan's. But in Harper's desk drawer, detectives found something else. Letters. Notes. Not to Ethan's mother, but to another woman. One was dated 3 years earlier from his previous school district. "You make me forget the rules," one letter read. Another was marked confidential, sealed in an envelope with a school district logo, a disciplinary notice. It stated that Harper had been accused of unprofessional conduct with a student, though the details were redacted. He'd been quietly transferred to Millstone the following year. The case file had been buried, until now. The town's opinion began to fracture. Some said Harper was a predator who manipulated a lonely woman. Others said Ethan had planned the murder long before he ever found out about the affair. Either way, Millstone was no longer a town, it was a courtroom. The courtroom was packed for every hearing. Ethan sat quietly beside his lawyer, face unreadable. The prosecution painted him as cold and calculating, a jealous son who couldn't stand losing control of his mother's affection. The defense argued that Harper's relationship with Laura was unethical and manipulative, preying on a vulnerable family. Laura testified once. When asked if she loved Harper, she hesitated. Then said quietly, "I thought I did." When asked if she'd known about his past, she shook her head and started to cry. Ethan didn't look at her once. The psychologist who evaluated him said, "Ethan suffers from deep emotional trauma tied to abandonment and betrayal. His sense of reality collapsed when he lost the two people he trusted most, his mother and his mentor." But the jury didn't see trauma. They saw murder. After only 6 hours of deliberation, they found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 30 years. He was 17. The day of the sentencing, Laura sat in the back row. As they led her son away in handcuffs, she stood, then walked out without a word. She left Millstone 2 weeks later and was never seen there again. Time moved on. The high school repainted the walls, replaced room 204's door, and hired new teachers. But people in Millstone never stopped talking. Harper became a ghost in memory, the charming outsider who met a tragic end. Ethan became a cautionary tale, the quiet boy who snapped. But those who read the case file knew it wasn't that simple. A journalist named Marcy O'Connor, writing for the Millstone Ledger, uncovered more of Harper's past. 2 more complaints. 2 more transfers. No convictions. She called it a pattern of silence. The article never reached national news, but in Millstone, it changed everything. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a jealous son, it was about a system that looked away until it was too late. Marcy interviewed Ethan in prison 10 years later. He was quiet, polite, older, but still carrying that same haunted stillness. When she asked him why he did it, he took a long breath and said, "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop." "Stop what?" she asked. He paused, eyes wet. "Taking people from me." Ethan never gave another interview. But in one of his final letters, sent to the prison chaplain, he wrote, "He taught me that words have power. He just never told me what they could destroy." Whether those words were about Harper, his mother, or himself, no one ever knew. Some say Ethan was evil. Others say he was a victim of manipulation, a child crushed between 2 broken adults. Maybe both are true. The law saw a killer. The town saw a tragedy. But the truth, whatever it was, died in that classroom the moment the gun went off. In the years that followed, Millstone built a new school wing, but room 204 was never reassigned. Teachers said it was out of respect. Students whispered it was haunted. And every so often, someone would find a line from Ethan's writing carved into an old desk, hidden beneath years of graffiti. Love doesn't kill. People do. What do you think? Was Ethan a victim of a system that failed him, or did he make a choice he can never take back? Should his mother share some of the blame? Or was Harper's past the real catalyst? Let me know in the comments. Because sometimes, the truth isn't about who was guilty. It's about who was broken first.